When my emotional system cannot pick up on your emotional system, then there is a kind of a gap between us. Otherwise, we naturally feel when somebody is sad, we feel that they're sad. When somebody is afraid, we feel they're scared. Or when somebody is numb, I feel immediately, the emotional system is a bit shut down. And to follow that, I think is important. Then emotions are not this kind of privatized properties, but they're actually mutual landscapes that connect us, and they connect to the fabric of the world.
Thomas, I love the lens that you have of the nervous system, where you're looking at not only individual, but ancestral, collective. And through the lens that you have of the nervous system, how would you describe the reason why someone might get sick as a result of trauma?
Yeah, there are many reasons. So first of all, when I sit with somebody that carries trauma, it happens usually in my groups where there are many people, like there are large groups, and then we do individual work within a collective presencing container. I feel that trauma creates like a preformed sculpture in a person. And what I mean by that is that the frozen information of the trauma that got split off or is hyper activated, and a lot of exaggerated stress is stored somewhere in a certain, I often describe this like a time-space file. We guide our clients to tune in with the parts that seem like causing symptoms or pain or whatever, or other symptoms. And then we look at what is the information that the body shows step by step by step. When my client goes deeper and I hold the space and I'm precisely following the inner movements. So it's less about intellectual reflecting, it's more about attunement and letting information arise that the mind can process. So it's more like a deep inner listening. And when I see the person starts to drift off, so then there's a gentle invitation to look, okay, are we aware of that and how we come back? But we let the body tell us its story. So I trust that the intelligence of the body surfaces the right information, but it needs to be pretty related, because otherwise we drift off in all kinds of stories and our defense mechanisms take us all kinds of labyrinths. But when we stay on track, basically, then we can allow every movement and let that movement open up the next movement, and then open up the next movement. And like that, we go deeper and we see, okay, these are the symptoms, but here are the roots. And here we come closer to what happened either in our childhood or in our embryological development or in our ancestral lineages or in the cultural field that we grew up in, and how they are all interrelated. And I think also when we look at attachment trauma, for example, of course, attachment trauma is very important and it has a huge impact on our physical and emotional and mental development. And at the same time, there is most of the time not a standalone attachment trauma. The attachment trauma happened because our parents are traumatized too, and their parents most of the time were traumatized too. So there is a whole system. And I'm describing this as the IAC fluidity, like the individual, ancestral, and collective, either frozenness or liquefaction of life information that through the precise attunement to all these levels, and sometimes we go deeper in the individual work, but then we need to open something in the ancestral field for the physical healing to go deeper. Because it's not just information that is stored in the person, is not a separate particle in life, but always interdependent. And I think that interdependence is a very important and beautiful principle. Modern medicine brought so many new innovations and inventions that are amazing. And at the same time, our lens became very individual focused. And I think opening, at least in some disciplines in medicine or in psychotherapy, the space more into a human being is interrelated and there are data flow systems. I simply believe that our nervous system, and I don't have a physical proof, a scientific proof for what I'm going to say now, but in my understanding, when I sit with clients, I can literally see and feel different departments of their nervous system when we relate to what's happening now, when we relate to what happened in the childhood. So it's a different attunement capacity. When we relate to ancestors, I believe we're going into our ancestral nervous system. We didn't train using that capacity a lot, so I think it's not very mainstream. But I think it's a part of our nervous system where we sense ancestors, and there's a part of our nervous system that is plugged into the collective system, how we sense collective fields. We open up our own minds as professionals how to make more space that the individual is embedded in a larger data flow. And that data either flows or the data is stagnant in the past, so it's also stagnant in the body of the person that sits in front of me. And so when I begin to relate to the stagnation, to the trauma holding, the tension, the hyper stress that is in the system, so then by peeling the first layers, and if I pay attention, then I can see, oh, that actually exceeds the biography of the person. And we need to look at, for example, the grandmother's war experience, because there a lot of trauma happened that influences the person, the woman that sits in front of me, strongly. In my experience sitting with thousands of people, for me that seems very obvious, the connection.
Now, if we applied this to our current existing medical model, this would really change things, because as we are trained at the moment, it's by taking a history of just that individual. We start, if we're really good, especially if we're a functional medicine professional, and we're going to start even with the in utero exposures, and I mean, us being really good. But then we're taking a history and we're asking basically a checklist of, well, have you had this type of event in your life? Have you had this type of event? If we are considered trauma informed, then we're even doing a history on specifically the adverse childhood experiences and calculating a score. And yet what you're saying with the nervous system, and I love how you describe the nervous system of being a book of life, right? Like the book of life. And there's so much data, there's so much information, there's so many influences that come in that aren't ever going to show up on a checklist of events. And so it seems like we really need to shift our understanding of, and definition of what it means to be a trauma-informed professional, especially in the medical field. And what would you see as your ideal for this is what it would mean to be a trauma-informed professional?
Beautiful. So my ideal will be that we find a combination of inner and outer capacities, because I think there's a strong emphasis on all the scientifically proven facts that we can form into checkboxes and lists and everything that is standardized. But at the same time, when I ask about, I think we need all of that, but I need my inner experience as a mirror to confirm when I, for example, ask about an event and the person says yes, then my nervous system becomes like an echo chamber to kind of feel how much data, information, contraction, stagnation is still in the body or in the experience of that person when I ask that question, when patients or clients are in states of overwhelm. So it's very easy to, that stress or that numbness, that absence, the shutdown or the fight and flight mechanism triggers medical professionals. Either people become very angry and short, or people kind of withdraw and get numb. But in those moments, when I'm resting in a grounded state, I can stay related to that exaggerated state and become a co-regulative power in the room to let that slowly de-escalate. But if that triggers me, and anyway, I had a full day, I saw so many people, I have tons of work to do, and then somebody is stressed, it's much easier to go a bit back and to distance myself from the stress. That looks at first as good for me. But I think the contraction that needs to happen in me to pull out is actually not good for me. But that's a big step, because that means that I need to look, when I get triggered by stress in my environment, I need to look actually what is the stress in me that gets turned on. And so if I integrate that more and more, I become actually a very grounding force in whatever environment I'm working in. And otherwise, I need to regulate myself through distancing. And I don't think that that's healthy, because that's also a stress phenomena in my own system. We call this often taking care of myself, but I think the only taking care of myself is if I evolve my own inner experience, which means that everybody has some sort of trauma inside. And sooner or later that's gonna get triggered. So I need to do my inner work. And that actually is the support the healthcare system needs in order to turn it into a sustainable environment where we have people that can work for decades with joy and with, kind of longevity in the system, and not get drained and burned out and have all kinds of other side effects.